Um, yeah, Tom is in, I guess he's out of the country, and so he couldn't come here today. And so he asked if I could give these slides, which I can, although I only saw them this morning for the first time, so I'll do my best. So maybe that will make it fast and we'll end on time here. So back almost 9 months ago now, I guess, in this very hotel, a group of maybe 20 of us or so met to just talk a little bit about Phobos data and how we might be able to best gather data to make it useful with a specific eye on the MMX mission, but a general eye on, Phobos is kind of a funny body because it's been observed by so many different spacecraft, but almost none of them really have focused on Phobos. It's been a kind of, hey, over there, and bringing all of that together is difficult. On top of that, Phobos is not round, it's a lumpy body, and so that makes things more difficult. And so it was kind of a brainstorming group trying to figure out what types of actions might be taken to slowly help the community and make products that are more useful. So what did come out of that was kind of the formation. So this is not an ag, this is a working group, a formation of a steering committee led by Tom Duxbury. And the people on the list there are sort of what the committee became formed from. A few more than that were actually at the meeting. Now, I will say one caveat on top of this is that this working group has no funding. And when a working group has no funding, it is kind of hard to get very many things done. So a lot of what will be in these slides are things that we think would be good things to do and things we need to maybe go and find some funding sources to do, but we don't really have funding to do them. But it was a group of scientists, of data producers, of people familiar with GIS, and standards and metadata and all kinds of stuff like that. So the things that we identified that would be good things to do are, let's identify and prioritize the existing data sets. What would be the most useful things to get into a unified system? For example, Phobos spacecraft observations go all the way back to Mariner 9, but maybe we should focus on some of the HiRISE and the HRSC data before going back and trying to fit the Mariner 9 data in, since it's mostly superseded by those newer data sets. And specifically what the Japanese are going to want to do is they're going to take their own data, and a lot of it higher resolution than what we have, but they want to be able to plan to what we know. Encourage existing missions to continue looking at Phobos in particular, but Phobos and Deimos when they get the opportunity. So HRSC is still in orbit about Mars and might look once in a while. HiRISE is only orbits under Mars, and so can only really see the same under Phobos, so only can see the same near side of Phobos that it's seen before. So more data would be helpful, but not really expand the resolution of what's there. There's, I think, tests on Odyssey are one of those that is a slide in the future that we'll talk about that. Tom has been going to these teams and just encouraging them to take observations if possible. Developing a catalog with metadata so that it will be easier to search for the data that you want. So I want an image of this area here. How can I find that without wading through, terabytes of Mars data on the PBS? And most of the Mars, most of the HRSC data, for example, if you want to go find it, they say, hey, great, here's a lat-long map of Mars. Where do you want the data? And say, no, look up. So there's just tools that need to be made that aren't there yet. Trying to engage the international community. So HRSC is, a European camera, and so they have been taking a lot of these observations, especially some of the best observations of the backside of Phobos because of their elliptical orbit. And MMX, of course, is led in Japan, and so they're interested in getting more into Phobos Deimos science and mission planning. So again, yes, that MMX mission kind of gives you the reason to get this together, but I think it has a broader scientific rationale for doing so as well. And at the bottom is what I had said before. It's expected that active NASA planetary missions and data analysis programs would fund US science activities. So here's an example of some observations that have been taken more recently with HRSC. they've been actually doing a bunch of kind of fun but also useful observations where they put Phobos in the same frame as Jupiter, for example, or you can see Deimos down there with Saturn. But they have a lot of opportunities, and so if they have opportunities and can look at these things, why not take a look? That also leads to a lot more data that you have to collect and figure out what you're looking at. This was Mars Odyssey. Again, a note that this is another area of small body science that Josh Banfield was contributing to, and just want to remember his contributions and that we miss him, and we've lost a great member of the community. But he was Deimos is what I was thinking about. He was leading the Deimos thermal analysis of Phobos, and so these are really the only thermal data we have of this body, and so trying to get this into the system and analyzed. And these are kind of a lot of details that are probably better left to perusing these slides after the fact, but collecting metadata to go with all of these observations, again, so you can better search for and understand what the images that we have contain. This is really Tom Duxbury's project, so I don't have too many insights into the details, but he notes at the bottom here that an initial PDS review has been completed. So he's been working with the PDS to make something that can be archived. He notes that there are, again, difficulties in trying to figure out what data you want. Not only is there not a great place to go and say, here's the lat lon of this observation I want, but in this Phobos picture, for example, you have about half of the lats and lons of the entire body in the scene. So if you wanted to confine it to a latitude, longitude box, you'll end up getting probably more data than you want back. Similarly, that can be a challenge when you want to restrict your emission or incidence angles, and that you have almost all of them in almost every picture. And so Tom is also working to make, I think, projected images for each of these, and really put metadata into the images that will give some of the IAU named features and lat lon of the image corners if they're on the body, and basically what quadrants do the images contain. And again, there's a PDS review that's been completed on an initial version of this catalog. This looks to be a map of the Deimos data mapped out. I don't know anything else about the Deimos data, so I will say it looks very pink. But presumably you can fit, Deimos data is the same as these images. You can fit the metadata to fit these as well, and be able to better see where you are on the surface and actually do some science with it. So near-term activities, Tom has completed a bunch of these reviews with the PDS for these metadata catalogs, and has continued to engage the HRSC team and the Odyssey team to try to encourage them to take more observations. I think the biggest future activity for this working group is it's really hard to do anything with no money. So to try to figure out what maybe little things could be done, cobbled together here and there with what time people have. Yeah, so I'm happy to take questions.
Tom Statler, NASA headquarters. Carolyn, for the benefit of the room, I'm just going to say something that I know you know perfectly well, and that is the distinction between a working group without funding and a really strong proposing team is very, very strong.
This is Tim. The one question I would have is, what would be the next step for this group? Is there something that we could be advocating for as a community?
Well, I guess, like Tom says, the path forward to doing things as exists now is start applying to things like a PDART or things like that. So to get focused ideas that you can concentrate and then write an excellent proposal and get funded. Which is, of course, doable, but difficult. So, I mean, SBAG doesn't have magical money either. But if this were an important enough part of a cooperation with MMX, for example, to encourage That would be
But,
something.
but there aren't bureaucratic hurdles. I mean, it's not that there aren't programs you can apply to. It's just that you haven't yet.
Yeah.
Other questions? Anything online? Okay. Thank you, Carol.